So, so the foundation of Astungkara Way, so originally Tim was working at Green School and he left Green School to create Astungkara Way. Originally at Green School, he was part of a program which was to connect the school to local farmers. And he went out and met local farmers and said, okay, what can we do? And I think this is a really important part of perhaps our discussion, is like, ask the farmers, like, what can we help you with? And they said three things. First of all, we would like you to help us sell our rice, perhaps at a higher price. Because there's a lot of like middlemen getting involved and the prices are going down. And at the same time, they said we want to be able to maintain or to sell at a higher price. And at the same time, the yields in our fields are going down because of overuse of chemicals. So we kind of, what we understood from there is like, okay, we would like help to stop using chemicals and sell rice at a higher price. Okay, number one. Number two is the farmers were saying, well, Bali is like a hot spot for tourism. How can we also benefit from ecotourism? So like diversifying the business model of rice farming, kind of, and number three is how can we get young people involved in this? Because the average age of farmers in Bali is 60 years old. 59.8 exactly, and the average in the world is 60 years old. I don't know if you know this, but this is like a looming time bomb, which is definitely going to cause very big issues in not too long. Is like who's going to grow food in 20 years,
right?
Or in 10. These were so after hearing this, Tim started a program. Because this was already when he was with Green School, I wasn't here yet. Tim started a program where he would take, and this will answer your question, you'll see, where he was taking parents from the Green School, and he created a program called Living. And the idea was to use the revenue from that course to fund the transition for those farmers from chemical farming to non-chemical farming. Because typically when you do so, you have a drop in yield for about 1 or 2 cycles. Okay, so imagine a farmer's using like chemical, nitrogen, like the famous like NPK pellets. They're throwing in the pellets. Of course, they get their usual yield. If they don't do that and they switch to, for example, compost, let's say, like non-chemical farming, they will typically get a drop for 1 cycle. After that, they get equivalent yields, like the soil health comes back, and after that they get increasing yields, over time, blowing away chemical agricultural yields.
Yeah.
But you need to de-risk that transition, which can last 1 to 2 cycles, which farmers cannot afford to do.
Right.
So that course, the goal of that course was exactly to de-risk that transition. It was a huge success, and actually. So I was participating on the last day of the last session of that course, planting the rice, and that's when Tim said, yeah, I'm quitting Green School and I want to start a company that's going to do only this. And I was like, holy shit, okay, this is good. And he said, by the way, there's also another thing, is, he literally said this, he said, I had a vision and a snake told me I have to create the first walking pilgrimage across Bali. And I was like, ooh, okay, this is, okay, interesting. You got me on the snake. Well, first of all, it fluctuates because not all farmers do, like even if you can do 4 cycles per year, they don't usually do so. They have one intermediary like rotation, which will be like nitrogen fixing plants like beans or stuff like that. But they also grow a lot of flowers. They also do rotation with flowers. So I can tell you that the farmers that we work with, so the group of 220 is still in transition, right? Not all of them have dedicated all of their rice paddy to this technique, but it's producing about 70 tons per month. So like about 200 tons every 3 months. Cool. Yeah, good point to circle back to those 3 points. So first of all, I mean, I'll give you numbers that are in Indonesian rupiah, so maybe this is not super relevant, but you'll get like an idea of scale. So for a kilo of rice, which is farmed conventionally, farmers will typically get about 9,000 rupiah. Okay. So when we have agreements with farmers that if they we produce two types of rice with farmers. Maybe I won't get into too much detail, but basically the first step, which is the easiest one for them to do, they need to only reduce the amount of chemical fertilizer that they use, but they need to stop using chemical pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides. And we help them make natural replacements for those. So like plant the trees and the shrubs that they can use to make the natural products. And instead of burning the rice straw at the end of the harvest, which causes like huge plumes of smoke around Bali at the end of every harvest, they use that to make compost. And if they do that, we will buy the rice from them at 13,000 per kilo. So from 9 to 13. Taking into account that they have significantly reduced costs for inputs, right? Because as they reintegrate the rice straw provides about 30% of the nitrogen which they would need to input. So their nitrogen input bill goes down by 30%, and they don't need to pay anymore for pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, which is significant. So their margin increases. And we are able to sell this rice at a higher price because we sell it with a story. We provide marketing around it, and the hotels and restaurants that we work with will typically, like reprint their menus and put a little card on tables so that people, that says something like, by eating our rice, you're supporting a regenerative movement in Bali, something like this. And interestingly, actually, so we sell that rice like wholesale for about 15,000, let's say, to a hotel or restaurant. And usually they would buy rice for about 12. And the price difference is actually, in most cases, covered by their marketing budget. So interestingly, it is, hospitality marketing, which is kind of funding this transition. So that's the first point, is, how do we increase their revenue? Now, again, this discussion could last many hours, guys. But that's the first step of rice. I said there's two types of rice that we produce with them. There's a second step, so that first rice was called healthy rice. Okay. The second step is what we call regenerative rice. And in that case, the farmer actually stops using even chemical fertilizers, and we help them implement a technique, which is actually a traditional technique, which is how rice was grown 50 years ago before the Green Revolution, in which we reestablish the ecosystems of the rice paddies, meaning that we integrate things like ducks during the rice cycle, fish in the paddy, border plants. And by doing so, the farmer, for example, when he puts ducks and fish, he gets free fertilizer, but he also gets additional revenue from ducks and from selling fish. So you're further increasing the revenue of farmers by lowering their fertilizer bill and increasing, by multiplying their revenues. Very good question. So our trail team took about 14 months for R&D for this trail. And why did they take so long is because the trail only goes through, first of all, like small paths, which is already a difference from the other trails. It's very difficult to walk across Bali. So sometimes, we'd start, we'd reach a village, for example. We've already done R&D before. We reach a village and we want to go to a next village. I'll tell you in a minute how we choose the villages, but we want to go from one village to the other. And we don't want to take roads. We want to, walk through rice fields or walk through paths. So we would, ask the local people, like, how do we get there? So that's the first thing, was like pathing. And the main thing is selection of trail points. And that is the main difference with other trails, is that all of the trail points are communities which are engaged in regenerative action. So, for example, our starting point is what we call our first regenerative farming learning center, RFLC, so Regenerative Farming Learning Center, and that's where our HQ, that's where our main building is, and that's in the middle of the rice paddies. Okay, so our first farming center is in a place where they grow rice. And we start with a transition to regenerative rice farming. Our second point on the trail is a community further up in the mountains, which focuses on regenerative market gardening, market farming. So growing vegetables, greens, some fruits. And that's where we've built our second regenerative farming learning center. And so, for example, right now we have like a really unique, first of a kind program around rice. We work with about 200 rice farmers now, but actually in not too long, we're going to be launching a second program in our second RFLC to work with market gardeners in that area to help that whole area also transition to non-chemical vegetable farming. Our third stopping point is a community that works that is involved in coffee. So they have already started a transition towards organic coffee growing, and over there also later on, maybe in a couple of years, who knows, probably less, we will have a program around coffee. And the fourth point is clove farming, and then after that, you know what I mean? So this is how it's different, is that each of these points is a community where when the visitor comes, they have something to learn about how people are living sustainably. So in all of our regenerative farming learning centers, of which actually now we have 5, right? So we have like rice, market gardening, coffee, clove, and actually coral restoration. In each of those places, we provide English classes to local kids for free.